Charlas de la noche. Palabras con imagen. El análisis de los acontecimientos que influyen en nuestra vida con el periodista Francisco Durán Rosillo.
Durán Rosillo te saluda y los saluda a todos ustedes, su amiga María Celeste Raraz, para invitarlos a que se suscriban a mi canal de YouTube, María Celeste Raraz, tal como mi nombre, donde les informo todas las semanas sobre entrevistas que tienen un tema que ayuda a mejorarnos como personas y de paso son interesantes. Las pueden encontrar en mi canal de YouTube, así que los espero. Y se suscriben gratis.
Hola amigos, buenas noches, buenos días en algunas partes. Estamos aquí nuevamente en otra charla de la noche, palabras con imagen. Los ejércitos. Un estudio, de acuerdo al documento en video que me hicieron llegar, un estudio periodístico basado en reportes de inteligencia a nivel mundial, llega a la conclusión de que las dictaduras se rodean o hacen a los ejércitos corruptos. Un país que tiene un ejército corrupto es una dictadura y es el que abusa, mata, extorsiona, tolera la operación de los carteles, como ya salió en los Guacamaya Leaks, que es el ejército quien le vende y les da armas a los narcotraficantes, a los carteles, para que se sigan matando, y tiene sentido. Les dan las armas, los dejan que se maten, ellos no meten las manos, solo los extorsionan. Bueno, pues de igual manera está pasando en Rusia, y van a ver en el estudio cómo Vladimir Putin hizo corrupto al ejército exactamente como lo está haciendo Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Y para colmo de males, lo dejé al final porque es un video muy triste. Me lo mandó mi audiencia en Chiapas. Los carteles tuvieron la osadía, tolerados por algunas autoridades escolares, o alguien tuvo algo que ver allí, porque para mí que no entra, les pusieron droga a los estudiantes, a los niños, en sus alimentos. Eso no tiene nombre. Y es precisamente que están pasando todas estas cosas porque no hay una seguridad, no hay una vigilancia. Yo recuerdo cuando yo era niño en México, la gente decía, ¿saben qué? Ya va a entrar el ejército. Todo el mundo se calmaba. Había un mitin político, en aquella época no había esas cosas que hay ahora de balaceras, de secuestros. Ay, amigos, me encontraron refrescando un poquito la garganta en este intermedio comercial. Recuerden que estamos en vivo para radio y se cansa a veces la garganta cuando uno habla continuamente. Bueno, les decía que esto no pasaría si hubiese una autoridad verdadera, una autoridad que no fuese derivada de manejos corruptos, de atropellos, de una retórica vacía, una retórica basada en la mentira y en el engaño. Por eso ya estamos en el colmo de las situaciones. Por eso ya nadie respeta ni al presidente y él no se hace respetar. porque básicamente es evidente que alguien manipula y maneja a López Obrador, y ese alguien son verdaderos militares inteligentes que han sabido aborazarse de todo. Qué casualidad, ya les entregó el manejo de obras, el manejo de aeropuertos, las aduanas, las fronteras, el ingreso de vehículos, bancos. Va a ser el ejército el que ya en la próxima elección, junto con los carteles de la droga, manejen completamente todo lo que pasa en México. Y así está pasando en Rusia. Si a Vladimir Putin le ha fallado el ataque a Ucrania en ciertos aspectos, es porque no tiene un ejército leal, un ejército dedicado a defender a los rusos. Por eso los 300,000 rusos que quiso enlistar para ir a invadir se rebelaron y no quisieron ir. Lo mismo va a pasar en México. Hay deserciones en cantidades industriales en las Fuerzas Armadas mexicanas. Por eso se atrevieron a envenenar a estos niños. Y es ya la hora en que el pueblo de México se va a empezar a defender. Los padres de esos niños van a empezar a levantarse. Y no lo digo yo, tiene lógica, todo tiene una causa y efecto. Hay una línea del tiempo perfecta que va determinando las cosas. En este momento, aparentemente, el control, el poder lo tiene López Obrador. No, lo tienen los carteles. Y es el ejército quien les da la dosis de poder. Me acaba de llegar una nota, que estoy todavía verificándola, del Industrial Military Complex. En Estados Unidos se exportan armas. Estados Unidos tiene una gran cantidad de fábricas de armas, de todo tipo. Alabama está atestado de fábricas de misiles y de cabezas nucleares. O sea, Estados Unidos lo hace, pero muy escondidito. Bueno, Ovidio Guzmán acaba de hacer un pedido a través de sus empresas fantasma en Estados Unidos porque no hayan cómo regresar el dinero de la droga a México, porque no, son cantidades de dinero que usted no se imagina. El cartel de Sinaloa tiene más ganancias que la petrolera Exxon, la más grande de los Estados Unidos, para que tenga una proporción. Bueno, están ordenando un nuevo pedido de armas que supera en número, cantidad y dinero a todas las órdenes de armas que ha venido haciendo el ejército mexicano. O sea, ¿para qué quiere el cartel de Sinaloa más armas? Si hace menos de 6 meses recibieron camionadas de armas. Es más, por aquí tengo el video de cuando el Chapito las está probando. Déjenme y se los pongo para que tengan una idea el tipo de armas que están ordenando o que están comprando. Ven como policías y militares.
Pero la aflojaste.
Lo ovacionan y todavía se promueve en sus redes sociales, ¿eh? O sea, esto es inadmisible, pero bueno, sucede. Y vean la ignorancia. ¿A qué creen que le dispara? A un árbol gigantesco que es toda una joya pánica.
Venga, de todo, hombre, ya está entrado. ¡Qué verga! Pero la aflojaste. Sí, no, vámonos.
Ahí se llenan los radios, las que están festejándole el estreno de las nuevas armas. Entonces, ¿a dónde vamos con todas estas situaciones?
Venga, el detector, hombre, ya está entrado. ¡Qué verga! Ah, pero la aflojaste. Sí, no, la cabrón. Ya para que la verga. Otra vez, de una vez, venga, el detector, hombre, ya está entrado. ¡Qué verga! Ah, pero la aflojaste. Sí, no, la cabrón.
Entonces, pues, estas imágenes nos dicen claramente que las policías están compradas y controladas por los carteles, el ejército, el mismo presidente Andrés Manuel López Obrador está controlado por este joven malévolo. Entonces, México ya es la ingobernabilidad total y lo que va a pasar, que es lo mismo que le va a pasar a Vladimir Putin, que en este momento sobrevive usando misiles que le están obsequiando el gobierno de Irán y el gobierno de China, porque de acuerdo al estudio, Vladimir Putin no tenía todo su equipo militar en buen estado. Vamos a ver y a seguir informando sobre qué sucede en esta situación. Ahora, yo les decía que el Military Industrial Complex, que es el que controla la venta de armas y todo, está ya estudiando la posibilidad de negar la venta a Ovidio Guzmán del cartel de Sinaloa. Yo voy a estar muy pendiente porque estoy completamente convencido de que esta corrupción no nos va a llevar a nada bueno. Tenemos que actuar y se están gastando el dinero de los mexicanos en un gobierno inútil, inoperante, completamente entregado a los criminales. Buenas noches, buenos días. Nos vemos y nos escuchamos mañana. Hasta entonces.
Before its invasion of Ukraine, the Russian army projected a certain image to the world. It was one of a modern and capable fighting force, the world's second most powerful army, equipped with state-of-the-art T-14 tanks, rat-neck infantry combat systems, fifth-generation fighter jets. It was a near peer to NATO, or, as far as some commentators were concerned, actually a peer or even superior to the United States military. After the invasion of Ukraine, we saw a very different side of the Russian military. We saw a force with rations 6-7 years out of date. We saw a force with knockoff tyres that hadn't been maintained, tanks that didn't have enough fuel, and troops that lacked even the most rudimentary of training and combat equipment. I've gone into before why budgeting and strategy didn't really align with producing the army that Russia needed as it moved into Ukraine. But even with the budget going to the wrong places, you could argue, Russia should have had a more powerful military than it turned out to. It had all sorts of purchasing power parity advantages. Things are cheaper in Russia. They don't pay their troops very much. The budget they have should have gone far enough to produce a far more capable military than we saw roll into Ukraine in late February. So the question is, why? And the problem can be introduced pretty easily. Let me introduce you to Sergei. Sergei is the defense minister of the Russian Federation. It's a good job if you can get it. Sergei's official salary is about $120,000 at least for the last time I was able to find figures. Now that's really not bad by Russian standards, but it's certainly not incredible. This, allegedly, is Sergei's $18 million mansion. Sergei's life is pretty good. His daughter actually bought the land, allegedly, for this when she was 18. And there's nothing suspicious about that at all. All 18-year-olds buy massive plots of land. All 25-year-olds own sprawling mansions outside Moscow. After the invasion commenced, Ukrainian anti-corruption authorities actually went so far as to send Sergei a thank you for allowing corruption in the Russian army to get so great that it had diminished the combat effectiveness of the Russian forces. And and today I want to look into that cancer of corruption a little bit. I previously avoided it because it's hard to quantify, but you can't talk about why the Russian army is behaving the way it is without talking about the issue of corruption. So what am I going to cover today? I'm going to open with caveats so I don't get sued and so you understand what this presentation is focused on. I'm going to give a few stats around corruption in Russia in general, and then from a procurement and practice perspective, I'm going to talk about how military and procurement corruption works, or at least some sorts of it work. I'm going to give a couple of work examples to demonstrate how that might work and how it builds upon itself until you destroy the capacity of an army to operate. Then I'm going to explain why it's so damaging in general, why militaries are particularly vulnerable, and also some ideas generally about what we can do about it. But before I do that, and here are some words I never thought I'd be saying, here are some words about the sponsor for today's video. If you've followed me for a while, you will know that I am deeply suspicious of both clickbait headlines and ideological echo chambers when it comes to reporting. Ground News is a news aggregation and comparison website and phone app that tries to get around that problem. What it allows you to do is look at headlines that are emerging and compare the coverage of various journalistic organisations at different points on the ideological spectrum to identify blind spots and to compare coverage. It also gives you a lot of additional information as well. If you're dealing with news websites that you're not familiar with, Ground News has got information on their historical slant and have done the evaluation work for you to an extent. They also provide a raft of additional information, like what the ownership structures of certain organisations are. Are they government news networks? What's the historical factual accuracy rating? It also lets you go further, I think, and interrogate a little bit about your own media consumption habits. So if you're studying stories on, say, the Ukraine crisis, for example, you identify whether or not there might be gaps in the coverage that you're consuming that are telling you the story that you want to see, rather than the full spectrum of information that's out there. So, while I don't think this can solve the problem of media polarization overnight, I think it's a valid attempt and a tool that tries to fight back against that phenomenon. So if you're interested, ground.news/Perun is the link for checking out the product. My thanks again to the people for Ground News for sponsoring me today. So here are some caveats up front. Firstly, everything I say in this presentation is either allegedly or possibly, or in some cases the words might be, it seems likely to me that. Nothing in this presentation should be taken as a representation or a statement of fact. I use a bunch of external sources, which I will quote when I can, but please, everything I say here is alleged. Any resemblance to any people living or dead is entirely coincidental, and what I'm going to focus on, because there's a huge range of corruption at play, I'm going to focus specifically on the clearest and worst examples of corruption, theft and misuse, where people are actually stealing state funds or resources. I'm not going to talk so much about grey corruption. Grey corruption are those cases where there's politics or influence at play, and the actions that are taken may or may not actually be illegal, but they can certainly be highly damaging to state interests. It's also not a comprehensive list. There's a lot of corruption that goes on in the world, and I can't talk about all of it today. But if you have examples that you would like me to talk about in terms of case studies, please put them below in the comments. I also want to say that this is not just a Russia thing. Corruption is not just a blight that affects Russia. It's universal to a greater or lesser extent. I'm focusing on Russia today because that's the topic of the presentation, and Russia is the nation that invaded Ukraine. I'm not claiming specifically that, for example, Ukraine has no corruption. Corruption in Ukraine is not zero, but it's its own case study and a subject potentially for another presentation. I'd also say this is not a detailed study on how to corrupt a military procurement process. It's not a how-to guide, so please don't take it as such. Okay, so just to give a sense of scale to everything that we're about to talk about, let's give an idea of corruption in the Russian military in general. The reason I didn't talk about this too much when I did the original All Boy No Basics is because it's really hard to quantify. This may surprise you, but criminals aren't, quick to disclose exactly how much money they steal and is appropriate in a given year. I know, it's really inconsiderate of them. So there's a couple of ways we can look at this. You could, for example, look at the number of anti-corruption cases, but that could be either more or less corruption, or it could be more or less effective enforcement. We could look at Transparency.org's rating that puts Russia 136th out of 180 countries when it comes to corruption, with 180 being the worst and 1 being the best. But again, some people in Russia might object to using international observers for rating corruption perception. So I'm going to use some Russian sources here to provide some headline numbers, including Russian sources, namely the former president, Dmitry Medvedev, and Russian military prosecutors, both of whom are on record as suggesting that in their relevant times in office, about 20% of the defense budget was disclosed as being stolen every year. Medvedev suggested similar scales of corruption across the military and other state institutions. The papers in academia suggest that the level of corruption varies. The resource sector is extremely corrupt, others don't have quite the same level of theft. Anecdotally, based on the evidence I've been able to gather and from academia, corruption now in the Russian army is certainly not as bad as it was in the 1990s, where people were literally stealing everything that wasn't nailed down to ship it to Liberia, like some real Lord of War stuff. But it's still broad, egregious, and omnipresent when it comes to Russian military procurement and sustainment. But if you're trying to understand how damaging corruption can be to an army and how damaging it's specifically been to the Russian army, you need to go well beyond that 20% figure. You need to understand how corruption manifests and why it can be so damaging. So we're going to look at corruption at sort of 5 key levels of the military organisation. And remember that these classes are not exhaustive, and some types of corruption cross levels. I'm going to look at senior political leaders, senior military leaders, lower-level commanders, supply officers, and then the poor sods at the bottom of the totem pole. What does each of them do in order to undermine the efficacy of the overall organisation? Because when you're in an environment like the Russian military, corruption really is fun for the whole family, and no matter how far you are down the totem pole, there's always going to be opportunities to make a quick buck. So let's start by talking about the senior political leadership, the Sergeys of the world. The Sergeys of the world control a number of elements in the defence, appropriation, procurement, sustainment cycle. They control senior appointments, so who gets specific plum positions in the military. What happens in terms of budgeting, top-level procurement decisions. These are often made at the highest levels of government and can decide who does or doesn't make a fortune. So, since they have that sort of power, here there be procurement and budgeting scandals aplenty, and these can take a variety of forms. You can give contracts to connected companies in exchange for kickbacks. You can accept grossly overstated prices on your contracts in order to help a friend make a profit. You can appoint allies to key positions, or you can sell positions for a profit. You can direct budgets towards particular special interests. So if you have some mates that produce a particular sort of hardware, well, you can decide that what the Russian army really needs is not modernised drones or tanks. It really needs those gold-plated toilet seats that your mate manufactures. That's where the money should be going. These are the sort of things that you can do at the highest levels. And as a result, you're probably getting a yacht and a mansion for your trouble. So to give an example of this, it really being about who you know at the upper levels of the Russian government. So there was a series of contracts given for managing military bases essentially in Russia, worth about $400 million US at the time, which is a significant amount of money on a country that has about a $60 billion defense budget. Now, the companies that won this, you'd expect them to be reputable, experienced, to have a long history of bidding, except they were pretty much all registered like a month before they bid. All the former CEOs were basically former police officers and Siloviki, so former members of the security state. In total, there were something like 28 shell companies involved, and the common factor between all of them is that they all linked to this guy here, Prigozhin. Prigozhin is an entrepreneurial Russian oligarch with close links to Vladimir Putin. He maintains a very diverse portfolio, as you should as a rich person. So, for example, he owns both restaurants and mercenary groups. He's linked to Wagner Group, for example, who have been involved in Syria, in Africa, and now in Ukraine. Interestingly, these companies, which are obviously very legitimate and not linked to each other at all, many of them seem to access the bidding system for the contracts from the same IP address, from a location used by a company that was owned by Prigozhin's mother. I don't know why they did that. That does seem a little bit suspicious. Anyway, these companies that have been registered by people who have never won a contract like this in the past, all from the same location, all linked to the same guy who happened to be very close to Vladimir Putin, they won the contract. Authorities did look at it. They found that clearly this was a breach of all the rules around bidding, and then they promptly did nothing. Because that's what happens when you're really good mates with Vladimir Putin. Then we move down the chain. Let's call this guy, in this scenario, you're now General Oligarchov, okay? You're not at the absolute top of the totem pole, but you control some of the higher level functions in the military. So there's some great opportunities available to you for corruption. You don't control the top-level budget, but you've still got serious opportunities. You can issue fictitious contracts to companies to supply your troops, wherein you basically pay out funds for services that are never provided, and those funds get pocketed. You can misuse your troops and use them as labour. They don't need to be training, they can go build mansions instead. You can divert funds that are meant for military goods right back into your own pocket, or those of pockets of those close to you. You can sell positions and postings just like the top rank guys do. You can basically channel that old British tradition of the good old days where you used to be able to buy officers' commissions in the British Army. Now that went out of fashion in the 1800s, but, you know, in Russia it might be alive and well. And of course you can exercise considerable influence over procurement decisions. If you're the senior officer on a particular military project, for example, you're in a position to make or break a company's attempts to bid for a large contract, and that can come with some significant kickbacks. A yacht's probably not in your future, you're probably not going to go that far, but you can do significantly better than your salary, which is not great by any stretch, decent by Russian standards, but it's not going to exactly pay for the mansion and yacht lifestyle. So a good example here of corruption at this sort of level, let's talk about the story of the Pyotr Veliki, the Peter the Great. The Peter the Great is the largest surface combatant warship in active service in the world. She is a monster. She is a nuclear-powered, the term often used as battle cruiser, but she is a platform for carrying large numbers of missiles that was designed to stand off from United States carrier battle groups, launch a bunch of missiles at them, and ultimately sink them. Now, my source for this particular story is a paper by Belyakova and Perlo Freeman. I'll link that in the description. But basically, in 2010, the Ministry of Defense ordered certain repairs be done to the Pyotr Veliki. Zvezdochka won the contract. Now, Zvezdochka is a reputable shipyard, so it makes sense. It was $11.7 million in repairs. But people got suspicious, and there were initial investigations into the contract which revealed really the price should have been about $8.6 million, and the balance of the contract was stolen. That's a nice, clean $2.9 million US scam. But they dug deeper and it got worse. So first of all, it turned out the works were never done. They were paid for, but there were no actual works done to the Peter the Great. Nor did the ship actually need any repairs in the first place, which is where having senior officers in command of fleet elements and ships have to collude with those who control the companies in question. And then it got worse. So this Zvezdochka wasn't the real Zvezdochka. It was another company named the same thing that was also in the shipyard business, but it wasn't the well-known yard, and it wasn't qualified to work on ships with nuclear reactors on them. Worse, that company, it turns out, had won a bunch of contracts to repair, in inverted commas, nuclear submarines over the past several years, and it was filled to the brim with employees who just happened to be relatives of the company's director. Wow, okay, so that's a good one. The director got 8 years in prison and a $30,000 fine. So of course all that being done, the Russian Ministry of Defense instantly gave fake Zvezdochka more contracts, and surprised, the new director of the company was also a crook, just like the old guy. The new guy was then arrested for embezzlement in 2016, and several Ministry of Defense officers were arrested. Now, if that's how one story ends, with everyone getting arrested and a bunch of money being recovered, you have to imagine there's a lot of contracts and situations where the money isn't quite recovered. But let's just say you haven't quite made it to the top of your career yet. You're in the middle. You're a lower-level commander, so you control a military unit, and you need to make that turn a profit for you. I'm going to call you Colonel Kleptovsky for the purpose of this example. So you don't have the grandiose opportunities for corruption available to you, but you've still got a couple. You could misuse your troops as labour again, and I've got a world news example there of a senior officer hiring out his troops as slave labour and pocketing the fees. You could divert supplies and critical resources, so this is no longer diverting government contracts to your mates. You don't have that sort of power. What you can do is you can take the gear that arrives at your unit, and you can basically flog it off for cash. Your troops don't actually need it. A key tactic here is you get specific funding to do things like training exercises. Training exercises cost money because you need extra fuel allocations, extra equipment allocations. Things break. Troops require allowances. It's expensive to have your guys not in barracks, but to be out exercising, firing their weapons. So if you just don't do the exercise and instead pocket the funding, well, that might augment your relatively mediocre polkovnik salary. So you can't really influence procurement, as I said, so you're focused on selling and diverting what's being procured for your units. But really, you don't even have to be that senior to get on the action here. If you're a supply officer moving down another level, you're the guy who's running the armory, the warehouse, the store. So clearly, by the rules of possession, that means that all the stuff there is basically yours, right? I mean, the army paid for it, but it's basically yours now because it's in your armory. So supply officers in every military are absolutely vital to security. They're the ones who keep the records, they're the ones who keep things under lock and key, they're the ones who make sure this sort of corruption doesn't happen. But if everyone above them is stealing, Well, sooner or later they're going to see the opportunity. They can't control live contracts, but there's lots of ways for them to basically appropriate the things that do come into their care. One tactic, for example, is you can sell weapons and equipment that comes into your care and then write them off as damaged or destroyed on exercise or stolen or missing. You can falsify records so that the equipment never existed or was faulty on arrival or has been transferred out and make it someone else's problem. There's all sorts of white-collar ways that a smart, system-savvy supply officer or a quartermaster can make supplies disappear and end up in their own pocket. You can pull off all sorts of petty diversions here and cover your traps because you're the one who's responsible for tracking it all. And after all, in the Russian army you're basically paid nothing at this level, and you look at your bosses, who you know are at least a little bit corrupt, some of them are driving Mercedes, some of them have mansions, and you just might think that maybe pocketing a few dollars for yourself is worth it, even if that means some of the kit doesn't quite make it to the troops. Which then takes us down to the absolute bottom level, where most of the theft has already happened, and it's now all up to you, Private Conscriptovich. You're at the bottom of the totem pole. If you're a conscript, you're paid about $30 a month. If you're a contract soldier, you might be paid $900 a month. Those are very rough figures. Exchange rates and whatnot change from year to year. There's a general rule, the food's horrible, the equipment's crap, living conditions suck, so your life's not particularly good. But you've got some options available to you if you're the kind of go-getter that wants to have a little bit of a better life than your military salary allows. The main things that are left to you are petty theft, diversion, and sloth. You can steal stuff that isn't nailed down if you can get away with it, and you can just not do your job in retaliation for having a pretty bad lot. And in doing so, you have the power, Private Conscriptovich, to destroy a military more thoroughly than 1,000 corrupt politicians. So let's give a worked example. So I've talked you through how this works at each level. Let's illustrate this from start to finish using a hypothetical example. Let's give the hypothetical example of developing a new body armor system. Because one thing we can't forget is that R&D engineers in Russia, they may not be particularly well paid, many of them are quite old, many of the design bureaus and organizations and experts date back and were serving as far back as the 80s and pre-fall of the Soviet Union. All that being so, they're capable of miracles on tight budgets. Russia is capable of developing some very impressive kit. So let's just pretend they produce, I'm calling this Fortress, a new highly effective, future-style body armor system that can defeat, let's just say it can defeat 50 cal rounds, it has an exoskeleton, it's going to make the infantry the most effective infantry on the modern battlefield. Now, there is a snag, even at this stage of research and development, where some poorly paid member of the team sells all the specs and a prototype to a lovely American in sunglasses who offers him $1.5 million for the plans. And since he makes, 20 grand a year, he thinks that's a pretty good deal, and the Americans ship off a copy. But that's okay. The design goes forward, prototypes are shown, and everyone's super excited at all the arms fairs about this brand new Russian system that has NATO terrified. People on YouTube make a dozen clickbait headlines about how Russian stormtroopers are going to crush NATO, and that's that. So now it's time to actually buy the thing. We've researched it, it's time to purchase it. Fortress wins massive support in political circles, and a budget line for updating armour is written into the state armament order as a future armament replacement program. But there are competitors out there. It's not just the developers of Fortress. Someone else out there has developed a cheaper, inferior version. It's not quite as fancy, it can't stop most rounds, but it is much cheaper. We're going to call it Stalinium for this example. And those competitors, because their product is cheaper, they can afford to offer it at the same price as Fortress, with a lot more fat in their budget to do things like pay for major kickbacks. If Fortress costs $25,000 a set and Stalinium costs $10,000 a set, well, the Stalinium guys can bid $25,000 a suit and have $6,000 or $7,000 a suit set aside for bribes to make sure they win the contracts. Now, this might not be direct bribes. It might be that the contracts go to people in whom the higher-ups have shareholdings or their family are linked to. There has to be some way to pass an economic benefit to them. It's not just cash changing hands in black paper bags. So suffice to say, the higher-ups look at this situation, they can buy the Stormtrooper armor Fortress for $25K, or they can buy the OK, functional, modern tier armor for $25K, and they can get a yacht out of it. So, of course, Stalinium goes into production, too bad Fortress. Then, the decision having been made to purchase it, it goes into production and ordering. It's time for units to start equipping with selenium. It's time for the factories to start turning it out. But here's the question for the unit commanders. Why should they not profit if all the higher-ups are getting the $6,000, $7,000 in their pocket per unit in exchange for producing the inferior product in the first place? I mean, some of these officers will have actually paid bribes to secure their posts, so they have to turn a profit somehow. So there's lots of options here to cut deals and divert funds. Maybe they can make an agreement with the manufacturer wherein instead of paying the manufacturer $25K, they pay the manufacturer $15K, but they don't actually get an armor suit in response. They just get nothing. They pay the $15K for the manufacturer to be quiet. They pocket the $10,000. There's hundreds of ways that you can configure this sort of corruption, but the point is, the armor never actually makes it to the units, but the money still gets spent, and some of that money goes straight into the unit commanders' pockets. Now, the unit commanders can't send their troops out naked. That's not really a good option. So the generals and colonels are like, we have a bunch of perfectly serviceable Cold War tech still in storage. Let's just say you still have a whole bunch of Cold War stuff. I'm going to call it Shitbox 1980. So you've got a bunch of Shitbox 1980 in storage, and you're like, well, we're just going to give that to the troops instead. It's perfectly fine. It's not like we're going to go to war with anyone or anything. So, let's just issue that and everyone makes their money. Alright, so now it's phase 3. We've got to supply the units with the stuff now that's been produced and ordered, and the troops hear the news that they're getting Shitbox 1980, and Shitbox 1980 starts arriving at the supply bases. Now, if you're an enterprise and supply officer, you see an opportunity at this point. The plates in the front of that plate carrier, those things go for $1,000 on the open market. So of course, as the Shitbox 1980 units start arriving from deep storage at the units, the supply officers remove all the plates from the plate carriers and start flogging them on eBay or something. Maybe they replace them with sheet metal, or maybe they replace them with nothing at all, but they sell the actual good stuff. Supply officers look around because they can't give the troops nothing. People get suspicious, and they see they've got some old crap, jackets, t-shirts, whatever. And if it's good enough for the catechins from Warhammer 40k, then the dumb grunts won't even know the difference. After all, tell Yashka, those striped shirts, those are basically bulletproof, right? They didn't need armor plates, so the troops get issued brand new 30-year-old t-shirts instead of state-of-the-art body armor, which gets you down to phase 4, the unit level. Here you are, a poor Frontoviki in the Russian army, and you've just received your set of Shitbox 1980, and there's either there's sheet metal in it, or there's no plate in the plate carrier. It's not very good. It sucks to be you, Private Conscriptovich. Now, you very much would like to have some armor because you think you might be going to war. You'd like to have something that can at least stop a frickin' musket ball. So you need to find the cash for something better out of your own pocket, basically. And while you're at it, a few extra rubles for food and a good time, some vodka, wouldn't really go straight, especially if you're a conscript and you're trying to make do on $30 a month. That's a tough gig. And after all, your leaders are all criminals, they're all stealing everything. You know you were meant to get fancy armor, and instead the supply officer's saying, nah mate, it's t-shirts and jackets, that's what we've got. So you start, let's just say, embracing your entrepreneurial side. And the best thing you can do here is you can steal everything that isn't nailed down. At an extreme example, if you're working in a reserve equipment depot, maybe you start pulling the optics and the wiring out of the old tanks and flogging it. I mean, you can get $1,000 for the copper that you rip out of a T-72 in storage, awesome. Probably get something for the optics, sell a couple of things for scrap metal. You can probably make ends meet a lot better than you can on just your salary. And then so far as your work goes, why would you work hard? Everyone's treating you like crap, so why would you do preventive maintenance on your vehicles? It's cold out there, it's -5 degrees. Why are you going to go out and exercise the 300 vehicles in your part of the park that are assigned to you? No, you're going to sit inside and you're going to dutifully sign the bit of paper that says that you went out and did preventative maintenance on all of them. And while you sit warm inside, thinking yourself a genius for having screwed over the boss, those vehicles will suffer from decay and become practically useless over time. Which leads us to phase 5, where the rubber hits the road. Turns out you are going to war, you've invaded Ukraine, and suddenly Private Conscriptovich and his colleagues are in a very bad place. The reserve vehicles they pulled out of storage, they won't start because someone stole all the wiring. The ammo's ancient, someone stole all the diesel, which means you're running out of fuel halfway into your planned advance. Private Conscriptovich is watching all of his allies get in their ancient armour and their shitbox 1986 get absolutely slaughtered. Because it turns out that when the Americans found out that Russia was developing an armour set that could protect against most rounds, they spent a fortune developing an armour-piercing rifle that was designed to deal with that armour. Now Russia doesn't even have that armour, and Ukrainians are engaging in tremendous overkill as they get the latest and greatest of NATO weapons. The commander who's trying to organise all this is a political appointee who bought his position, and all of this is happening for, as I said, about $900 a month. So, when you get to this point, where nothing's working, where the invasion's a shit show, where your commander is an idiot, is it that surprising that the response of Private Conscriptovich and many of his friends is to basically say, nope, start looting a few homes, grab a washing machine, put it in the post and try and send it home so the family can flog it? Only for the stuff that you loot and try to send home being stolen by all the logistics staff who are responsible for shipping it home. Basically, with corruption, no matter what, whoever's on the bottom loses. So, humour aside, and I employ the humour to make sure this topic isn't too depressing, why is corruption so damaging, and why is it so much more damaging than that 20% figure would suggest? And I want to go back to first principles here, economic first principles. Corruption is possible because a person is given the ability to sell something or steal something without paying the true cost of doing so. They're doing something using someone else's money, someone else's property, and they're not acknowledging the externality of their action. As a result, the price in corruption is never efficient. You're never charging as much money as you are doing damage to someone else, or at least most of the time you're at. We're going to explain that a little bit more in a moment. But the key point here is that 20% of the budget being stolen doesn't mean a 20% less effective military. It's a lot worse than that. The other clarification I need to make before I explain how the corruption gets as damaging as it is to explain that not all corruption is theft per se. I'm focusing on theft, but not all corruption is just the same as breaking into a bank and stealing the money and walking off. Procurement corruption and other forms certainly exist. If we talk about the all-on drone for a moment, the all-on 10 drone, let's just say that drone should cost $20,000. But as a company, I know I can charge the government $100,000 if I pay a $20,000 bribe to the procurement officer. The price here isn't efficient. $20,000 is being made by the person doing the corruption in exchange for an $80,000 cost. It's a solid externality. It's not efficient. And in this case, the funds don't even count as stolen. There are no stolen funds in this situation. A bribe is being paid, but the government's just paying for an overpriced contract that's probably entered into completely legally. And there are dozens of ways to do this. One example, which I might go into more detail if I do a second video on this topic, is specification tailoring, which is where you can basically, even in a nominally fair process, rig a contract so that someone is much more likely to win than others by including very specific requirements in your specifications that basically don't say they're discriminating between companies, but do discriminate between companies. Just wanted to have that caveat up front. So how does corruption damage you? Well, the first thing to say is that it can destroy research and industry, because it can change the incentive for manufacturers. In a perfectly free, non-corrupt market, the way to win a contract is to develop the best product at the cheapest price, because that's what the government will buy. In a scenario where corruption is allowed or frequent, the winner is the one with influence and pull. In fact, you're probably going to get more return on your investment if instead of developing a better product, you spend more of your money on bribes and influence. Take the right people out to dinner. Bring on the right advisors in highly paid positions in inverted commas. Make sure money ends up in the right pockets. And that's much cheaper than developing an actual functional next generation product. And because that's the way forward, if anyone does come along and tries to threaten the gravy train that corruption enables, well, suddenly they're the enemy of everyone who's currently engaged in that market, and they turn to other measures in order to try and squash those companies and force them to either play ball or leave. The other way that this also reinforces itself is that one mechanism that you'll often see is so-called revolving door appointments, wherein there are jobs for the boys.
Durán Rosillo te saluda y los saluda a todos ustedes, su amiga María Celeste Raraz, para invitarlos a que se suscriban a mi canal de YouTube María Celeste Raraz, tal como mi nombre, donde les informo todas las semanas sobre entrevistas que tienen un tema que ayuda a mejorarnos como personas y de paso son interesantes. Las pueden encontrar en mi canal de YouTube, así que los espero. Y se suscriben gratis.
Escuchaste el análisis de la noticia, transparente como el agua, con el periodista Francisco Durán Rosillo.